The roar of heavy machinery ripped me from sleep at 6 in the morning. Through my bedroom window, I watched an excavator tear a trench right across the only road to my lakeside cabin. The diesel fumes hit my nostrils as I stumbled outside in my boxers and boots. A woman in a bright pink business suit stood next to the machine, waving directions at the operator. Deborah Myers, president of our Homeowners Association and the kind of neighbor who measures your grass with a ruler. I grabbed my grandfather's brass compass from the truck dashboard. The thing had been with our family since he surveyed half this county back in the 50s. It was trembling from the excavator's vibrations. "What the hell is this?" I shouted over the noise. Deborah turned, her smile sharp as a knife. "Oh, Tom, perfect timing." She pulled out a manila envelope. "You're being fined $2,500 for unauthorized use of private property." Private property? I looked at the road I'd driven for 15 years. "This is the only way to my cabin." "Your guest cabin." She emphasized the words like they tasted bad. "Which violates our new waterfront development restrictions, effective immediately." A sheriff's deputy stepped out from behind the excavator. Officer Martinez, a guy I'd known since he was a kid riding bikes around the neighborhood. Now, he looked uncomfortable as hell. "Sorry, Tom," Martinez said. "I got orders to secure the scene until this gets resolved." "Resolved?" The word came out strangled. "You're blocking my access to my own property." Deborah's smile got wider. "The property belongs to the community trust. Your cabin sits on land designated for environmental protection. We have photographic evidence of code violations, septic issues, and illegal modifications." She opened a folder thick with papers and pictures, photos of my cabin from every angle, close-ups of the dock I'd repaired last summer, even shots through my windows. "You've been watching my place?" "Monitoring," she corrected, "for the good of the community." Martinez shifted his weight. The handcuffs on his belt clinked together. "Tom, I need you to step back from the work area. This is official business." I looked down at the compass in my palm. The needle pointed due north, same as always. Steady and true, just like my grandfather taught me. "How long have you been planning this?" "Emergency HOA meeting tonight," Deborah said. 7 p.m. at the community center. You're welcome to present your case to the board." The excavator lurched deeper into the road, churning up gravel and earth. 20 years of driving this path, and now it was disappearing under steel teeth and diesel smoke. "And if I don't pay your fine?" "Foreclosure proceedings begin Monday." She tucked the envelope under my arm like she was doing me a favor. "Have a blessed day, Tom." Martinez waited until she walked away before speaking. "Look, man, I don't like this any more than you do, but she's got all the paperwork in order." "Since when does the HOA have the power to block public roads?" "It's not public anymore." He pointed to a stack of surveyor's stakes by the excavator. "According to these documents, this whole section reverted to community trust property last month. Something about unpaid assessments and boundary disputes. The compass needle hadn't moved an inch. North was still north, but everything else in my world had just shifted sideways." "You ever feel like you woke up in someone else's nightmare?" I asked Martinez. He looked around at the destruction. "Every damn day, brother. Every damn day." The excavator's engine coughed to silence. In the sudden quiet, I could hear water lapping against the dock at my cabin, 100 yards away and completely cut off. Deborah was already on her phone, talking fast and gesturing at the torn-up road, planning her next move, whatever that was. I'd built that cabin with my own hands after Sarah died. Every board, every nail, every coat of paint. It wasn't just property to me. It was the only place I could still feel her presence. Now some pink-suited bureaucrat with a clipboard wanted to take it away. The compass grew warm in my palm. I closed my fingers around it tight. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. What would you do if someone tried to steal the one place that meant everything to you? The excavator tracks had left deep gouges in what used to be my road. I walked the perimeter of the torn earth, counting steps like my grandfather taught me when we surveyed land together. 43 feet of destruction, right where the county easement should have been. Martinez was filling out paperwork on the hood of his patrol car. Steam rose from his coffee cup in the morning chill. "Tell me something," I said. "When did Deborah file for this work permit?" He flipped through his clipboard. "Says here, 3 weeks ago. Approved by county planning on the 15th. 3 weeks. I turned the compass over in my hand. Funny thing is, I never got a notice. Property owners are supposed to get 30 days advance warning for road modifications. Maybe it got lost in the mail. Or maybe it was never sent. I watched Deborah directing the excavator operator toward a pile of concrete barriers. You know what she's really doing here? Martinez looked up from his forms. Enforcing HOA regulations? She's forcing me to sell. The words came out harder than I intended. My cabin sits on the best waterfront lot in this development, prime real estate. But as long as I've got access, I'm not going anywhere. That's a hell of an accusation, Tom. Is it? I pulled out my phone and showed him a screenshot from a real estate website. Look what went up for sale yesterday. Lot 47, right next to mine. Asking price $400,000 for a half acre with no buildings. Martinez whistled low. Jesus. My lot's twice that size, with a cabin already built. You do the math. The deputy's radio crackled with a call about a domestic dispute on Elm Street. He looked relieved for the distraction. I gotta take this, but Tom, be careful who you're accusing of what. Deborah Myers has friends in the county office. After he left, I walked down to where the old road met the lake. The water was glass smooth, reflecting the October sky. A blue heron stood motionless in the shallows, hunting minnows with the patience of a saint. My cabin looked different from this angle, smaller somehow, vulnerable. I'd built it in 2018, 3 months after Sarah's funeral. Couldn't stand being in our empty house anymore. Every room held too many memories, too many conversations we'd never finish. The cabin was supposed to be temporary, a place to heal. Instead, it became home. Sarah used to say, I had a talent for finding trouble. You're like a magnet for conflict, she'd tease. But you never back down from what's right. Standing there with my feet in the mud and my access road destroyed, I could almost hear her voice. Don't you dare let them push you around, Tom Bradley. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Saw what happened this morning. You're not the first. Meet me at Murphy's Bar tonight after the HOA meeting. Ask for Tyler. A friend. I screenshot the message and scrolled through my contacts. Nobody named Tyler, but Murphy's Bar was where the county employees hung out after work. Clerks, inspectors, deputy sheriffs. People who saw all the paperwork that regular citizens never knew existed. The heron struck without warning, coming up with a silver fish writhing in its beak, one smooth motion from hunt to kill. Nature doesn't waste time on bureaucracy. Maybe I shouldn't either. Back at the house, I dug through my filing cabinet until I found the original deed to my property, purchased in 2003, clear title, no liens or restrictions. The legal description included ingress and egress via established roadway, with coordinates that matched my grandfather's old survey notes. But legal descriptions can be tricky things. Words on paper versus reality on the ground. Sometimes they don't line up the way you'd expect. I spread the deed across my kitchen table next to a county plat map I'd printed from the assessor's website. The boundaries looked right, but something nagged at me, a detail I couldn't quite place. The compass sat next to the papers, like a paperweight from another era. Its brass surface was tarnished with age, but the needle still found true north every time. Reliable, honest, unlike everything else in my life right now. 6 hours until the HOA meeting. 6 hours to figure out how Deborah Myers planned to steal my home without technically breaking the law. I picked up the compass and held it level. The needle swung to magnetic north, steady as a heartbeat. You ever notice how the truth has its own gravity? The community center reeked of burnt coffee and old carpet. 43 neighbors packed into folding chairs, most of them clutching the same manila envelope Deborah had handed me that morning. I wasn't the only one getting squeezed. Deborah stood at the front with a PowerPoint presentation already loaded. Behind her sat the other board members, her brother Rick, who ran the biggest construction company in town, and Mrs. Patterson, who'd never met a rule she couldn't weaponize. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, Deborah began, clicking to her first slide. A photo of my cabin filled the screen, taken with a telephoto lens. Tonight we address a serious threat to our community's environmental standards. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I recognized most of these people, the Hendersons who'd barbecued with me last 4th of July, old Pete who borrowed my chainsaw every storm season, Sarah's book club friends who still sent me casseroles, Now they stared at me like I'd poisoned their water supply. Property 7-41A. Another click, close-up shots of my dock, my septic system, the extension I'd added to house Sarah's art studio. Multiple code violations documented over the past month. She had pictures of everything. The rain gutter I'd patched with duct tape, the loose board on my front steps, even the old canoe I'd dragged up on shore and forgotten about. The septic discharge shown in slide 4 violates county water quality standards, Rick Myers added, pointing at a photo that showed absolutely nothing wrong with my system. Raw sewage flowing directly into our shared lake. That's bullshit and you know it, I stood up. I had that system inspected 6 months ago. Clean bill of health. Please hold your comments until public testimony, Deborah said sweetly. Mrs. Patterson, would you read the environmental impact assessment? Mrs. Patterson adjusted her glasses and read from a typed report. Scientific language about phosphorus levels and bacterial contamination and ecosystem degradation. None of it made sense, but it sounded official as hell. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. These weren't my neighbors anymore. They were a jury, and someone had already told them I was guilty. The board votes unanimously for immediate remediation, Deborah announced. Property 7-41A must be brought into compliance within 30 days, or face demolition and a lien against the underlying land. 30 days? I found my feet again. You can't demolish someone's home with 30 days' notice. We're not demolishing a home, Rick Myers smiled. We're removing an unpermitted structure from environmentally sensitive land. Big difference. The compass in my pocket grew warm against my leg, like it was trying to tell me something. I have a right to respond to these allegations, I said. Of course. Deborah clicked to another slide. Please present your evidence to the contrary. Evidence, like I'd known to collect it, like I'd had any warning this was coming. I walked to the front of the room, 43 pairs of eyes tracking my movement. The projector light felt hot on my face. This cabin has been my home for 5 years, I began. I built it to code, with permits, following every regulation on the books. I've never had a single complaint from any neighbor until 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago is when we received the anonymous tip about environmental damage, Mrs. Patterson said. Anonymous tip. I let the words hang in the air. From who? That information is confidential. How convenient. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the real estate listing I'd found earlier. But I'll bet whoever made that tip knew about this. I held up the screen showing lot 47 for sale. $400,000, right next to mine. That's completely irrelevant, Deborah snapped. Is it? Because I've done some math since this morning. I faced the crowd. 47 lots in this development. Average property value around $250. But lakefront lots, those go for $400,000, maybe $500,000, if you could get your hands on them. Someone in the back row whispered to their neighbor. The whispers spread. This isn't about environmental protection, I continued. This is about prime real estate, and the only way to get it is to force out the current owners with made-up violations and impossible fines. You're out of order, Rick Myers stood up. Am I? Then let's vote on it. All in favor of an independent environmental assessment of my property, paid for by the HOA, conducted by a third-party inspector not connected to any board member's business interests. The room went dead quiet. That's not how this works, Deborah said. Funny? It's exactly how it's supposed to work. I looked around the room. Unless you got something to hide. Mrs. Patterson called for order. Rick Myers demanded I be removed from the meeting. Deborah clicked frantically through her slides, looking for some regulation to shut me down. But the damage was done. I could see it in their faces, doubt creeping in where certainty used to be. The vote was 38-5 against me, but those 5 dissenting voices hadn't been there when I walked in. After the meeting, old Pete caught up with me in the parking lot. Tom, I don't know what's really going on here, but watch yourself. The Myers family has a long memory. I drove to Murphy's bar with the compass on my passenger seat, its needle pointing steadily north through every turn and traffic light. Have you ever walked into a trap and realized the only way out was deeper inside? Murphy's bar smelled like fried onions and decades of spilled beer, the kind of place where county workers came to complain about their bosses and forget about the paperwork waiting on their desks. I ordered a whiskey and waited. A kid who looked barely old enough to drink approached my table, skinny, nervous, wearing a county clerk's badge on a lanyard around his neck. "You Tom Bradley?" When I nodded, he slid into the booth across from me. "I'm Tyler Morse, Records Department." "You sent me the text." "Yeah." He glanced around the bar like someone might be listening. "I heard about what happened at your place this morning, the road closure. Word travels fast. It does when the paperwork doesn't make sense." Tyler pulled out a manila folder, keeping it low on the table. "I've been working in records for 3 years. Never seen anything like this." He opened the folder and spread out photocopies of official documents, work permits, environmental assessments, property boundary surveys, all dated within the last month, all bearing the signature of County Planning Director James Morrison. "Problem is," Tyler said, "Morrison's been on medical leave since August, kidney surgery. He hasn't signed anything in 6 weeks." The whiskey burned my throat. "So who signed these?" "That's what I've been trying to figure out." Tyler pointed to the signature lines. "The handwriting matches Morrison's file samples, but the dates are impossible." I studied the papers under the bar's dim lighting. Property survey for lot 7-41A, environmental impact assessment, emergency road closure authorization, all the documents Deborah had used to destroy my access road. "There's something else," Tyler said. "Your lot isn't the only one. I found similar paperwork for 6 other lakefront properties, all signed by Morrison during his medical leave, all targeting the most valuable real estate in the development. 6 other properties. The compass in my pocket seemed to pulse against my leg. Let me guess, all owned by people who've lived here longer than 5 years. Exactly. Original buyers who got in before property values went crazy. Tyler finished his beer and signaled the bartender for another. Someone's running a systematic campaign to force out long-term residents. The Myers family. I can't prove that, but Rick Myers Construction has submitted bids for environmental remediation of services on all 6 properties, same day the violations were filed. The pieces click together like tumblers in a lock, create fake violations, force expensive repairs, offer to buy properties at below market prices when owners couldn't afford the costs. Clean, legal, and absolutely ruthless. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Tyler stared into his beer. "Because my grandmother got one of these notices last week, property 4-27, the cottage where she's lived since 1987. "Where is it?" 3 lots down from yours, right on the water." His voice cracked slightly. "She's 84 years old, lives on Social Security and a tiny pension. She can't afford a $20,000 septic replacement. I thought about Mrs. Patterson reading that environmental assessment with practiced authority. Rick Myers pointing at photos that showed nothing wrong. Deborah's smile when she handed me the manila envelope. "They're not just stealing property," I said. "They're destroying people's lives. And there's nothing we can do about it. The paperwork looks legitimate. Morrison's signature checks out against the samples on file. Even if I testified that he was in surgery when these were signed, who's going to believe a junior clerk against the county planning director?" "Morrison might." "Morrison's scared. I tried calling him yesterday. He hung up as soon as I mentioned the forged signatures." The bar's jukebox switched from country to classic rock. AC/DC's Highway to Hell seemed appropriate for the conversation. "There has to be something," I said. "Some way to prove these documents are fake." Tyler leaned forward. "Maybe, but it's risky. And it would require someone with access to Morrison's original signature samples, someone who could prove the timing discrepancies. Someone like you. Someone like me who wants to keep his job and not get sued for theft of county records." Tyler gathered up the photocopies and slipped them back into his folder. "I've already pushed this as far as I dare." I finished my whiskey and left a 20 on the table. What if I told you there might be another way? Something that doesn't require you to risk your career? I'd say you're dreaming. Maybe, but my grandfather always said the truth has weight. Lies are lighter than air. Eventually, they float away if you shine enough light on them. Tyler shook his head. "Your grandfather sounds like a philosopher." "He was a surveyor. Same thing, really. Both jobs require you to find out exactly where you stand." I stood up to leave, then turned back. "Your grandmother's cottage. Has she lived there continuously since 1987? "Never missed a day. Why?" "Because 1987 is the year this HOA was incorporated. which means her property rights predate any association rules or restrictions. The compass felt warm in my pocket. She might have more legal protection than she realizes. You think that matters? I think the Myers family is about to discover that some foundations are harder to crack than others. Outside Murphy's bar, I sat in my truck with the engine running and the compass on my dashboard. The needle pointed due north, steady and unwavering, just like my grandfather taught me. But for the first time since that morning, I wasn't sure which direction I was supposed to go. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones where you're not even sure who the enemy really is. 3 days later, the certified letter arrived. Foreclosure proceedings would begin Monday unless I paid $25,000 in fines and brought my property into full compliance with environmental regulations. The deadline was impossibly tight. The fines impossibly high. I spread the notice across my kitchen table next to the compass and my grandfather's old surveying equipment, his transit level, measuring chains, and field notebooks from the 1950s. Tools of precision in a world that seemed designed around deception. My phone rang, Tyler Morse, sounding panicked. "They fired Morrison," he said without preamble. "What?" "County planning director. Terminated yesterday for gross misconduct. Apparently they found evidence he'd been signing documents while on medical leave, backdating authorizations, taking bribes." The room tilted sideways. "That's impossible!" "Is it? Because they've got bank records showing mysterious deposits into his account, all dated to match the forged signatures I showed you." Tyler's voice dropped to a whisper. "Tom, they set him up. Someone knew we were investigating." "How could they know?" "I don't know, but Morrison called me this morning, said he's leaving town, advised me to forget everything I told you and keep my mouth shut if I want to keep my job." The compass needle hadn't moved, but everything else was spinning out of control. Morrison was gone. Tyler was scared. And I had 6 days to find $25,000 or lose my home. "There's more," Tyler continued. "My grandmother got served yesterday. Same violations, same fines. But she's not fighting it. Rick Myers made her an offer, $50,000 cash for her cottage. At $50,000, that property's worth 10 times that. Try explaining that to an 84-year-old woman who's terrified of losing everything. She's signing the papers tomorrow." After Tyler hung up, I sat staring at the foreclosure notice until the words blurred together. Sarah's voice echoed in my memory. "You're like a magnet for conflict, but you never back down from what's right." Easy for her to say. She never had to fight a war where the other side controlled the battlefield, the rules, and the referees. I picked up the compass and walked down to the lake. Without the access road, I had to hike through the woods, scrambling over fallen logs and pushing through spider webs. The path I'd driven for 15 years was already growing over with weeds. My cabin looked abandoned from the waterside. Windows dark, dock empty, no signs of life. Like I'd already lost and just hadn't admitted it yet. The blue heron was back, hunting in the shallows with infinite patience. I watched it for 20 minutes, waiting for the strike that never came. Sometimes the best hunters know when the conditions aren't right. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. "Stop digging or you'll lose more than your cabin. Some stones are better left unturned." A concerned neighbor. I screenshot the message and scrolled through my contacts. The threat could have come from anyone. 43 people at that HOA meeting. 43 potential enemies. But threats meant I was getting close to something that mattered. Back at the house, I opened my grandfather's field notebooks and spread them across the table. His handwriting was precise, methodical. Every survey marked with compass readings, chain measurements, and detailed sketches of landmarks. Page after page of careful observations from the 1950s and 60s. Property lines, road easements, water rights. The foundation of legal ownership in a world where precision mattered more than politics. I found the entry I was looking for on page 47, a survey of what was now my development, conducted in 1962. The sketch showed the lake, the main road, and a network of access paths connecting individual lots to the water. According to my grandfather's notes, the road to my cabin wasn't just an easement. It was platted as a public right-of-way, permanently dedicated to county maintenance. Deborah Myers might control the HOA, but she didn't own the county. The compass sat next to the notebook like a bridge between past and present. Its needle pointed steadily north, just as it had for 70 years. Some things didn't change just because someone signed papers saying they should. I photographed every page of the 1962 survey and uploaded them to my phone. Evidence that predated the HOA by 25 years. Proof that my access road was never private property to begin with. But evidence only mattered if someone was willing to listen. And after Morrison's sudden departure, I wasn't sure who I could trust in county government. The heron struck while I wasn't watching. I looked up to see it swallowing a fish, neck stretched skyward, wings spread for balance. Patient, precise, and absolutely ruthless when the moment was right. Maybe there was a lesson in that. My phone rang again. This time the caller ID showed a number I recognized. Rick Myers Construction. Tom Bradley. Speaking. This is Rick Myers. I understand you've been having some difficulties with your property situation. That's one way to put it. Look, I don't like seeing neighbors fight. What if I told you I might be able to help? Maybe we can work out some kind of arrangement. The compass needle trembled slightly, like it was reacting to his voice through the phone. What kind of arrangement? Well, those environmental repairs are going to be expensive, complicated. But I know some people in the county office. Maybe we can find a way to make this whole problem disappear. For a price. Everything has a price, Tom. Question is whether you're smart enough to pay it. Have you ever been offered exactly what you wanted by the last person on earth you should trust? Rick Myers wanted to meet at his construction office on Friday morning, a converted warehouse on the edge of town, surrounded by bulldozers and dump trucks, the kind of place where deals got made and problems got buried under concrete. I parked next to his black pickup and walked through the front door, carrying my grandfather's compass in my jacket pocket. The weight of it felt like carrying a piece of solid truth into enemy territory. Rick's office was all leather chairs and hunting trophies. A massive desk made from reclaimed barnwood probably cost more than most people's cars. He poured himself coffee from an expensive machine and didn't offer me any. Appreciate you coming, Tom. I know this has been stressful for everyone involved. It's stressful. I let the word hang in the air. That's what you call destroying people's homes? Now hold on. Rick settled into his chair like he owned the world. Nobody's destroying anything. We're protecting property values, maintaining community standards. By forging county documents? His coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. That's a serious accusation. It's a serious crime. I pulled out my phone and showed him Tyler's photocopies. Planning Director Morrison was in surgery when he supposedly signed these authorizations. Funny thing about medical records, they're pretty specific about dates and times. Rick studied the images, his face unreadable. Morrison's been terminated for misconduct. County found evidence he was taking bribes, backdating permits. Sounds like a man with credibility problems. Morrison was set up. Someone needed a scapegoat when their document forgery got exposed. You got proof of that? Working on it. Rick leaned back in his chair and smiled. See, that's your problem, Tom. You think like an investigator instead of a businessman, always looking for evidence and proof and truth. But the real world doesn't work that way. He stood up and walked to a filing cabinet, pulled out a thick folder, and dropped it on his desk. Property 7-41A, your cabin. I've done the math. Environmental remediation, septic replacement, structural repairs to bring everything up to code. $87,000, minimum. $87,000. Plus legal fees for fighting the foreclosure, plus interest on the fines, plus the cost of your time and stress and sleepless nights. Rick spread invoices and cost estimates across his desk. But I'm prepared to make you an offer. I'm listening. That's $75,000 cash for your property. As is, no inspections, no repairs required. You walk away clean, with enough money to start over somewhere else. The compass in my pocket felt like it was burning against my ribs. $75,000 for property worth $300. Worth $300 if you can prove clear title and building compliance, which you can't. Right now, your property is worth exactly what someone's willing to pay for it. Rick's smile got wider. I'm willing to pay $75. And if I refuse? Then you fight the county, fight the HOA, fight the environmental violations, and probably lose everything anyway. Difference is, you'll be broke and homeless instead of just displaced. I thought about Tyler's grandmother, signing papers to sell her cottage for $50,000. 84 years old and terrified of losing everything. How many other neighbors had gotten similar offers? How many had already signed? "You've done this before," I said. "I've helped a lot of families transition out of properties they couldn't maintain. It's a service, really. Saves everyone a lot of heartache." A service. I stood up and walked to the window overlooking his equipment yard. A dozen bulldozers and excavators, ready to tear down anything that got in the way of progress. What happens to the properties after you buy them? Development, improvement, higher property values for everyone. Higher profits for you. That's how business works, Tom. I take risks, I make investments, I create value. Not everyone's cut out for that level of responsibility. I turned back to face him. And if I told you I found evidence that proves my access road was never private property to begin with, that it's been a county right-of-way since 1962, Rick's coffee cup hit his desk harder than necessary. I'd say you're grasping at straws. Would you? Because I've got my grandfather's original survey notes, detailed sketches, compass readings, chain measurements, all documented 25 years before your sister incorporated the HOA. Your grandfather's been dead for what, 15 years? Ancient history doesn't trump current regulations. County regulations trump HOA rules. Always have, always will. I pulled out the compass and set it on his desk. The brass surface caught the morning light streaming through his window. This belonged to him. He used it to survey half this county, including the land we're sitting on right now. Rick stared at the compass like it might explode. "What's your point?" "My point is that some things don't change just because someone wants them to. North is still north. Property lines are still property lines. Truth is still truth. Truth is whatever you can prove in court, and courts cost money you don't have. Maybe, but I've got something you don't." I picked up the compass and slipped it back into my pocket. Time. Time? Your foreclosure deadline is Monday, but my research is just getting started. Every document your sister filed, every signature Morrison supposedly made while he was in surgery, every property you've bought from desperate neighbors. I walked toward the door. Funny thing about systematic fraud, the more properties you steal, the bigger the pattern becomes. Rick was on his feet now, his businessman smile replaced by something harder. "You're making a mistake, Tom." "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. Some mistakes can't be undone." I stopped at his office door and looked back. "You know what my grandfather used to say about surveying? The most dangerous part isn't getting lost. It's thinking you know where you are when you don't." Is that supposed to be a threat? It's supposed to be advice, but I don't expect you to take it. Outside, the October air felt clean after Rick's stuffy office. The compass pulled gently against my jacket, like it was trying to lead me home. But home was a cabin I might lose in 4 days, and the only way to save it was to prove a fraud that went deeper than I'd imagined. Sometimes the only way to win a rigged game is to change the rules, even when you don't know what the new rules are going to be. Monday morning arrived like a final exam I hadn't studied for. The foreclosure deadline was noon. I had 4 hours to either pay $25,000 in fines or lose everything Sarah and I had built together. Instead of panicking, I drove to the county courthouse with my grandfather's surveying equipment in the back of my truck. The compass sat on my passenger seat, its needle pointing steadily north through every turn and traffic light. Tyler Morse was waiting for me in the parking lot, looking like he hadn't slept in days. "Tom, thank God, I found something." He held up a manila folder, hands shaking slightly. "Morrison called me last night. He's not running scared anymore. He's pissed." "Good. Pissed people make better witnesses than scared ones." He kept copies of everything. Bank statements showing the fake deposits, medical records proving he was in surgery when those documents were allegedly signed, even security footage from the hospital showing him unconscious while Rick Myers was supposedly meeting with him. Tyler opened the folder and showed me photocopies of medical charts, surgery dates, recovery timeline, discharge summary, a complete alibi that made the forged signatures impossible. "Morrison wants to testify," Tyler continued. "He's ready to expose the whole conspiracy, but there's a problem." There's always a problem. The county commissioners are meeting in emergency session this morning. Someone leaked information about the forgery investigation. They're talking about settling the Morrison situation quietly, paying him to disappear and keeping everything sealed. I looked at the courthouse steps where Deborah Myers stood talking to a man in an expensive suit. Her lawyer, probably, getting ready to finalize my foreclosure and move on to the next victim. How long do we have? The commissioners meet at 10:30. Your foreclosure hearing is at noon. If they seal the Morrison records before your hearing, we lose everything. The compass needle trembled slightly, like it was reacting to the weight of the moment. North was still north, but the path forward wasn't clear anymore. Tyler, I need you to do something for me, something that might cost you your job. I'm listening. Get me into the county records room. 5 minutes with the original 1962 survey files, the ones my grandfather signed. Those records are restricted access. I can't just... You can, because you're a county employee with legitimate research authorization, and because sometimes doing the right thing means risking something that matters to you. Tyler stared at the courthouse building, weighing his career against his conscience. What exactly are you looking for? Proof that the road to my cabin was platted as a county right-of-way, permanently dedicated public access that supersedes any HOA restrictions. And if those records don't exist, then I lose my cabin and Rick Myers wins. I picked up the compass and held it level. The needle found true north instantly. But if they do exist, we're going to give the county commissioners something more interesting to talk about than settling with Morrison. 20 minutes later, I was standing in a basement storage room, surrounded by filing cabinets that hadn't been opened in decades. The air smelled like old paper and forgotten bureaucracy. Tyler nervously watched the door while I searched through boxes marked Survey Records 1960 and 1965. I found my grandfather's original survey on page 47 of a leather-bound logbook. His precise handwriting, detailed sketches, and compass readings documenting the entire development, including the access road that Rick Myers claimed was private property. But there was something else, a detail I hadn't noticed in his field notebook, a secondary survey line running parallel to the main road, marked with the notation, reserved for future county maintenance access, permanent easement, 40-foot right-of-way. My grandfather hadn't just surveyed the road. He'd created a backup route, a second access path that ran along the eastern edge of the development, connecting every lakefront property to the county highway system. The path was overgrown now, forgotten after 50 years, but it was still there on the official county maps, still legally accessible, still a public right-of-way that no HOA could block or control. Tyler, look at this. I showed him the survey sketch. This easement runs right past my cabin, and Tyler's grandmother's cottage, and every other property Rick Myers is trying to steal. Tyler studied the documents. This changes everything. If there's an alternative access route, the HOA can't claim environmental necessity for blocking your road. More than that, if this easement is still valid, every property owner in the development has permanent access rights that predate the HOA by decades. We photographed every page of the survey and rushed back upstairs. The county commissioners were already in session, and I could hear voices through the closed meeting room door. At 11:45, I walked into my foreclosure hearing carrying a manila folder of photocopied survey documents. Deborah Myers sat at the plaintiff's table with her lawyer, confident and smug. Rick Myers watched from the gallery, checking his phone like he had more important things to worry about. The judge looked tired and annoyed. Mr. Bradley, you have 4 minutes to present any evidence that disputes the outstanding fines against your property. Your Honor, I dispute the legal authority of the Homeowners Association to block access to my property. I opened my folder and pulled out my grandfather's survey. This is the original 1962 county survey for the lakeside development, conducted by licensed surveyor Harold Bradley. Deborah's lawyer stood up. Objection, Your Honor. This hearing is about environmental violations, not historical surveys. It's about access rights, I replied, which determine whether these environmental violations have any legal standing. The judge examined the survey documents. His tired expression sharpened into interest. Mr. Bradley, are you claiming there's an alternative access route to your property? I'm claiming there's a county-maintained easement that provides permanent public access to every lakefront property in the development. An easement that supersedes any HOA restrictions or environmental claims. Deborah Myers was on her feet. Your Honor, this is ridiculous. That easement was abandoned decades ago. County easements don't get abandoned, Mrs. Myers. They get formally vacated through a legal process that requires public hearings and commissioner approval. The judge looked at the survey again. There's no record of this easement being vacated. Rick Myers was staring at me like I'd just pulled a rabbit out of a hat. The compass in my pocket felt warm against my chest. Your Honor, I continued, I request a 30-day continuance to allow the county to verify the current status of this easement. If it's still valid, then blocking my access was illegal. If it's been properly vacated, I'll pay the fines and comply with all HOA requirements. The judge handed the survey documents back to me. 30-day continuance granted. County clerk will research the easement status and report back to this court. Deborah Myers looked like she'd swallowed something bitter. Rick Myers was already on his phone, probably calling his lawyer. Outside the courthouse, Tyler was waiting with Morrison, who looked like a man who'd decided to stop running and start fighting. How'd it go? Morrison asked. 30 days to prove a 50-year-old easement is still valid. I held up the compass. Think that's enough time? For the three of us? With Tyler's access to county records and my knowledge of planning procedures? Morrison smiled for the first time since I'd met him. I'd say Rick Myers is about to discover that some foundations are harder to crack than others. The compass needle pointed steadily north, just like my grandfather had taught me, true north, the direction of home. 3 months later, I was sitting on my cabin's front porch, watching the blue heron hunt in the shallows. The county had not only verified the 1962 easement, but had cleared and maintained it as a public access road. Deborah Myers had resigned from the HOA board after an FBI investigation into document forgery. Rick Myers was facing federal fraud charges for his role in the property acquisition scheme. Tyler got promoted to senior records clerk. Morrison got his job back with a formal apology from the county. And 6 families got to keep their homes instead of losing them to manufactured violations and impossible fines. The compass sits on my kitchen table now, next to Sarah's photograph and my grandfather's field notebooks. Some things don't change just because someone wants them to. North is still north, truth is still truth, and sometimes the old ways of finding your direction are still the best ways. You know what I learned from all this? The most powerful tool you can carry isn't a weapon or a lawyer or a pile of money. It's a willingness to stand your ground, when standing your ground is the right thing to do. If this story hit close to home, maybe hit that like button. And if you're dealing with your own neighborhood bullies, remember this. They're counting on you to be scared, confused, and alone. Don't give them what they want. Thanks for sticking with me through this whole mess. Sometimes the best stories are the ones where regular people refuse to back down from what's right. The heron struck without warning, coming up with a silver fish writhing in its beak. Patient, precise, and absolutely successful when the moment was right. Just like my grandfather taught me.